Here with Marcus Davis today. Looks like having a little bit of sound trouble. So we're gonna try this again. I had him on just a minute ago.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. All right. Looks like hopefully we're good now. Sorry we got cut off there. We're talking about how you got into fighting. We'll just
Right.
go into that.
Both, DNA and just, general interest. So I was always billed as the boxer when I fought in the UFC, and that was, obviously I think because of, I actually was a professional boxer, so I did turn, into a boxer, but well before that, I was involved in, I did a bunch of different traditional martial arts. I did some contemporary stuff too, so I did Judo and, and on that aspect, I'd fallen in love with a lot of the Filipino type martial arts, because of my interest in the combat oriented stuff. But as a profession, I did the professional boxing, and then, that segued into MMA at some point.
All right, sweet. Yeah, I didn't realize you had done some other martial arts. I do remember you saying to Joe Rogan one time, "Don't call me a boxer anymore." I never forgot that. I thought that was pretty great. But you actually thought about retiring after TUF, right? After your fight with Melvin Gerard.
Yep. Yeah. I had, at that point, I was already in my going into my mid-30s. And I had a lot of injuries, I had a lot of issues, and into that fight with Gillard, I'd never healed from the AC injury I was sustained from the show. I had sprained my AC joint, and they told me that it should heal within 6 months, but if it didn't, I would probably struggle with it for the rest of my life. But it did, and it ended up healing, but it took a lot longer. But George Gurgel, who I had met before the show when I was part of Team Militich. I had met him through Pat Militich very briefly, but on the show, I really got to know him and became, basically my best friend and my jiu-jitsu coach. And he was the one that convinced me after that. He just said, listen, you've done all this, you've gotten this far. You don't have to do any real work on your stand-up anymore, because at that point, it's been starting to train with Mark Talabrati on Muay Thai also, and he just said, just spend some time with me, and we'll get you a foundation of the ground, and we went from there, and it did, it worked, after working with George and with Mark Talabrati. At one point, I went on a 14-fight win streak, and 6 of those were, in the UFC, so, it was a good decision to stay in it.
Yeah, you were really killing it from a boxer to a guy getting leg lock submissions and guillotines. I mean, how long you were training jiu-jitsu? I watched a little bit of an interview on the Where Are They Now in UFC. You were training jiu-jitsu, of course, with George Gurgel every day. Was there a time when it just kind of snapped and you say, "Hey, I know I got this now. I can compete with anybody out there"?
Yeah, I mean, it did. There was a point that I kind of felt like, okay, wait a minute, I got this, I got the hang of this, and I understand some of the basics. Even though I felt that way at that time, I did not feel as though that I was a grappler in any sense, that I felt like, I could contend if I could only grapple, if that was it, and I was just going to grapple. I didn't feel as though I could contend with the best guys out there at all. I felt like, I was still, I would be a small fish in a pond of sharks still, but I did feel like my ability to strike and my ability to kind of get back to my feet and not be easily controlled on the ground was going to, that would change it, in regards of, MMA versus straight, sport type jiu-jitsu. So, which really isn't the case now. I mean, now, I'm 45 years old this year, and, not too long ago where, I've only competed in 25 years. I've only competed twice in like grappling arts, grappling tournaments, just for fun. And both times that I've done it now, which have happened in the last 3 years, 3 years ago I competed and I went against a guy that was a 6-time Brazil, champion, Rio champion, 2-time Pan American champion, and, just a very decorated guy. And I went into double overtimes with him without without either one of us, a draw basically. And then I kept, doing my thing, studying and everything, and continue to grapple. And then this past year, I competed in the Toro Cup in a super fight match against a guy that was a 2-time world champion. He won the Pan Americans. And it says a 200-time gold medalist, a guy by the name of Brian Edwards, the guy that runs Swamp Fox. And he was also, 6'4" and outweighed me by 30 pounds. And I finished him in 8 minutes. So, it's kind of changed a lot now where I have become, and it was a leg lock also, but where I've become, kind of full circle. I think that now I'm actually a better ground fighter than I am a stand-up fighter in a lot of respects because of, what happens when you get older and injuries. So, fighting standing up, you're going to get beaten up and you're going to take more injuries. And on the ground, at least, if you're just grappling anyways, there's a lot more longevity and control, and where striking is an exact art. You either miss or you hit, and it takes a lot of hand-eye coordination, complex and fine motor skill, and again, the timing and the range and all of that's involved in your striking. Whereas in grappling, a lot of it, like, you can almost get swept, you can almost get submitted and recover, and a lot of it is gross motor skill. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely timing and stuff like that involved with it, but I find it to be a much easier, safer way to train in martial arts than the striking aspect of it.
Absolutely. Well, I agree. I didn't box near your level. I was an amateur boxer for 2 years. I did judo and jiu-jitsu. I'm pushing 40 now, and it's like I don't want to get hit in the head. I want to be able to remember my kids, and stuff like that. But 30-pound difference in a jiu-jitsu match, that's a big difference on the ground.
Right.
Is
No, it is. It's a huge difference, and that was one of the things, I need to make sure in that match that I didn't end up on my back, So, and I didn't. So we spent a lot of time in the clinch, and I performed a couple of trips and stuff like that, and then he actually tried to pull guard, and because he had the really long legs, which can give a guy fits, and he just made a mistake, and it enabled me to get a hold of a leg, and I finished by a heel hook. So that was it.
That is great. What is going on with the leg locks and the heel hooks right now in jiu-jitsu? I was watching the Eddie Bravo Invitational. It's like you used to not see near as many of them. I know you've trained them for a while because you have submission in the UFC with it. But do you see guys just training it a lot more?
Yeah, I think that the leg lock itself. It being that a lot of your jiu-jitsu practitioners tend to rely, right, on being the smaller person. The whole idea is that the art is that I'm the smaller person and I'm going to be taken down and I need to defend myself. And so the first thing that you try to do when you know, if you do take somebody down, is you try to limit their ability to attack. And you know, we all know that there are many attacks from the guard. So, you know, if I get stuck in your guard, there's, you know, you've got more submissions available than I do from being in your guard. And the more I pass, like, I'm not saying that it's impossible that you can't submit somebody from, if you're on bottom and you're side mounted or you're mounted. Obviously you can. We all know that there are, you know, little movements and tricks and stuff that you can pull off and catch people, but you're very, very, very limited, and you're not going to do so on a practitioner that knows what they're doing. Like two high-level guys grappling with each other, and one high-level guy has mount, and the other guy's on bottom. The guy on bottom is not going to be able to submit the guy that's on top. You know, that's usually done in a very big difference in ability. So back to the guard, knowing that, right, is if I'm stuck in your guard, one of the first things that I can do is if I open your guard, I can pressure the pass. So either A, you let me pass, which means if you don't let me pass, the only way you're going to stop me from passing is by creating barriers or controlling my posture. If you can't control my posture, the only way you're going to be able to create a barrier is by pulling your knees up by your chest. Like you can't straighten your legs. So if you bring your knees up by your chest and I'm trying to pass now, you're actually giving me the ability to attack your legs even easier. So, you know, I think that's why, you know, you're seeing a lot of these people that if, you know, if again, it comes down to what the rules are. You know, if they were grappling in an IBJJF competition, which, you know, you can't do any reaping or any of those things, that you can't do a 50-50, you can't do any of that stuff, you know, I don't think they would perform as well. But if you're in a true grappling competition that is to submission, regardless what the submission is, those legs are going to be vulnerable a lot of the times. But if you flip that over and you now put it into MMA, it's not the same thing. Because anytime that you go for a leg lock, if you don't finish that leg lock, you're in a very compromising position. Well, if you're doing grappling and you don't finish it, you just continue to grapple. That's it. And then you go for the leg lock again, and you may not get it. You're not getting punished. And then you can continue to do so because there's no worry of you being punished. Whereas, you know, in MMA, if you don't finish a leg lock and a guy's on top of you and he starts hitting you, it can take one elbow or one good strike and you get open, wide open, and now you're bleeding profusely. And now that changes not only that the fight could be stopped or whatever, but it also changes, you know, the psychology behind what's happening in the fight. You know, the guy's kite, he doesn't know how bad it is. Now you might not, you might be a little bit more hesitant on some things that you're doing. So, you know, it's not the same thing. You know, each sport changes as soon as you change the rules. And, you know, it's that way. Like, people that tell me I could do, and I've had this happen many times where I know guys that are competent MMA fighters, and we've had discussions, and they'll talk to me about that they would be able to fight really well in a street fight. And I always say, well, that's very relative. It's as relative as saying, you know, when people say fighting isn't about how big or strong you are, it's about what you know. And I always say, well, no, that's not true. That's super relative, because, you know, if I'm much bigger and I'm stronger and I got more physical attributes, your knowledge of fighting has to be a lot higher than mine. A guy that outweighs you by 100 pounds and has, you know, size, strength, and you know, and some other physical abilities, the amount of knowledge that you've got to have has to be far surpassing anything. He has to be almost an idiot. Like, but if he has a very solid, like you take a bigger, stronger opponent, and you give him a solid foundation of just basics, you know, he's going to be able to finish, you know, a huge percentage of opponents that are smaller than him. There has to be such a difference of, you know, again, of somebody that's, it has to be, you know, the difference between a mediocre brown belt to somebody that's like a, you know, Marcelo Garcia, you know what I mean? It's just going to be so different.
Yeah, definitely. We got some questions coming in from some fans on the live stream. Question from Jason Azevedo. It says, was there anybody that you wanted to fight but you never got the chance to?
Yeah, you know, back in the day, there were two fights that I was really interested in. I actually recently was talking to one of them about, I was even willing to come out of, it was only one fight that I was willing to come out of retirement for, and we were talking about it. So that one was Phil Baroni, because back in the day, you know, we were both, you know, looked at as strikers, and I was more of the striker that, you know, I moved a lot, I was known for my footwork and stuff, and Phil was more known as that banger, just come forward and throw. And he and I are, you know, we're friends. I mean, we get along real good and everything. There's no disrespect. But we've talked to each other about fighting each other a few times, and that was one fight that I wish I'd had. But way back when I was, you know, when I was at my peak, was oh my God, what the heck is his name? I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. But and then it was the 155-pound Pride champ that ended up over in the UFC, and didn't do so well in the UFC. I'm trying to think, what was his name? Maybe you can bail me out here. The Japanese guy.
Wasn't Shinya Aoki. That was a different time. I'm trying. Was it Sakuraba? No, Sakuraba wasn't 155.
No, it was. Oh my God! Did it begin with a G? Is his last name begin with a G or something? I'm trying to think. Anyways, he was back. You know, back then. You know, he was the champ of Pride, and then for the smaller division, and then later on, you know, he fought Diaz, the older brother, in California, and Diaz ended up beating him by what was it? It was a Gogo Plata, and then he finally came over to the UFC and didn't do well. He lost a bunch of fights, and I'm sure that he doesn't. I don't even think he fights anymore, but that was a fight way back that I really wanted to have, because again, he was beating guys with strikes with just his hands, and I thought that would have been a great fight.
Yeah, it's driving me nuts now. I'm trying to think of it. It's like I got to know this guy from the part. Yeah, I can't think of it, but you think about, that's the only fight you would come back for, then, you think, is Phil Baroni?
Well, I mean, you know, as I said, I think that, you know, I'm not really interested in, you know, some of the fights that I had as I was ending out my career, the guys that I was fighting were younger than my oldest child. You know, I have a 28-year-old daughter, and I just found it to be, you know, odd that I'm fighting, you know, guys that are, you know, to me could be my kids. So I just really had no interest in that anymore. You know, fighting, as far as sport fighting, it became. It wasn't it wasn't anymore what I wanted to do or what I was passionate about doing. It became what I did because it was my job. You know, and there would have to be something that really, really excited me. And I had so many health problems towards the end that were unidentified at the time. I had some that were pretty obvious, and so I had some eye issues that were pretty serious and pretty obvious. And then, you know, I had what's called lower lumbar fasciitis syndrome. I had bulging discs at C5, 6, 7, and 8 were all bulging. And then I had a few other issues too. And then later on, I found out why I was, you know, constantly, my weight was up and down, and I was sick and off and on a lot. And a lot of joint pain and everything, is that I developed a bunch of food allergies from all those weight cuts that I performed. So, you know, I just got to a point that I felt like it was my body telling me, you know what, man, you got to get out of this, or you know, you're going to be suffering for the rest of your life. So, but now that I've been out for years, you know, I've leveled out, and I'm very, very healthy. I'm the healthiest I've been, you know, I would say before I was even in the UFC. So, you know, by the time I got into the UFC and I started fighting, you know, the ailments were catching up to me. But now, you know, I walk around. I went all the way up to about 220, you know, and I was weightlifting a lot, grappling a lot. Now I'm back down to maybe about 200, and I feel great, and all of my, you know, I see a doctor regularly, and all my checkups are I'm in perfect shape, especially for a guy my age, and, you know, and I'm doing everything that I want to do. I have no issues with being able to, you know, both, you know, grapple, and I still, you know, kickbox all the time with guys, and so I'm still doing what I love to do. It's just my job is now different. You know, now I'm a coach, and I'm partners in I own a law enforcement combatives company, and we're now starting a anti-terrorism company with 3 guys that are SF guys, special forces guys, that we're teaming up to do some private sector work and stuff. So busy doing that, and I also recently I've been hired, and I'm working with the Department of Public Safety here in North Carolina. So my plate's pretty full, on top of, you know, training fighters like Tim Boach, and I've got some other guys that I'm working with, and like just in a couple hours I'll be training 4 guys that are local fighters here in North Carolina for a little bit of time, and then after that I drive to Raleigh, and I teach Greg Jackson's MMA program in Raleigh Monday through Friday.
Wow, you are very busy, and I'm glad you're working with some of the police officers out there. And I've worked with some a little bit. Some of the guys out here practice some jiu-jitsu and stuff, and I actually rolled with them a little bit, and they had all their equipment on. I was surprised. I was able to get one guy. I was able to get him a couple of submissions. I thought I was a little rusty, and he goes, "Why don't you put all this equipment on now?" And man, I don't know if you've grappled with all that stuff on, but I'm like, man, they got to get these guys some lighter equipment.
So I have, so the company that I have with Tim Boach, we have different programs that we work. So one's a patrol combatives program. So our patrol combatives program, obviously, you know, we're looking at what they have for equipment. That's, you know, obviously that's a very important thing to take into place, that, you know, they're going to have an extra 40, 50 pounds of just equipment on in some cases. And then, you know, we're looking at very specific things having to do with, you know, they're going to be doing stops. And so we're really focusing on the ambush, you know, the sneak attack, the looking for pre-contact cues and setups that the bad guy might be doing. And then we have, you know, another program that is a SWAT program. So we work with some SWAT guys, and they now they have over 100 pounds. I mean, these guys are carrying over. So if you're a 165-pound guy and you're putting on another 100 pounds of equipment on you, you're you know, you are relying on your tools that you have. So not, you know, your hand-to-hand combat, but definitely, you know, you've got to have the hand-to-hand combat there too, so that you can control your tools, retain your weapon, and not get your weapon taken away from you and used against you. So, you know, we look at each individual thing and not blanket it for everything. So, you know, it's like again, it's no different than saying you're going to take sport jiu-jitsu and you're going to do that in MMA, and you're going to find out really quickly that it's not the same thing. So, so we definitely take all those things into consideration.
Very, very cool. I'm really glad that you're working with those guys. That's obviously been, you know, kind of a hot topic. Things going around. What do you think about? I've been talking with some guys, you know, wrestling and jiu-jitsu in schools. I don't want to get too political or anything, but seems to me like there's a lot of guys with, you know, that it would do them some good to get out some male aggression, some of these high schoolers and stuff. And we had judo in my high school when we were growing up. I think it helped me. What do you think that can be done there?
Yeah, I absolutely 100% believe in that too. I am not politically correct. I say exactly what's on my mind, and I tell everybody your right to be offended does not trump my right to free speech. So just because what I might say might offend you doesn't mean I can't say it. So I can say whatever I want, and if you don't like it, we can debate about that. We can have an honest debate. That doesn't mean that I'm going to hate you or dislike you. Just means we have a difference. And, you know, I don't allow cognitive dissonance to get into my head and dislike people that disagree with me. I have many friends that will tell you that they think I'm an idiot as far as what my political stances are or my beliefs are. And then I would think the same thing of them, but at the same time, we'd still willing to hang out together and, you know, and be friends. So I don't, you know, but back to what you said, yeah, I believe that, you know, this whole belief now that people are pushing that there's this male toxicity, I think it's a joke. I mean, it's in our DNA. You know, when men, before we had this, you know, political structure and the way society has been set up and built, you know, we were born with the ability to actually defend ourselves. We knew how to do it until, you know, we've all been domesticated now. So when we were first on this planet, we were like animals. You know, we were knew how to defend ourselves. We knew how to hunt. We knew how to kill. We knew how to eat right and all of that stuff. And so, you know, that's still in you when you come out of here, and you're kind of broken, right? You're like a wild horse that gets tamed. And so what happens, I think, is when you're a young boy and you're an adolescent and you're growing up, and people have kept telling you or making you shove all that stuff down inside your belly and not deal with it, it explodes and comes out in other areas, you know, and you need that outlet, like you mentioned, you know, guys that, you know, don't have some sort of outlet that is, you know, whether it's sports or whatever. So a lot of people, you know, a lot of your guys that are not in groups, let's say, do not feel comfortable trying out for a team sport. And, you know, they just don't have that in them. You know, they're antisocial or whatever. So you need to figure out what is something that they could do on their own. And definitely, you know, something like wrestling or judo or jiu-jitsu, those things, you know, they're not taking punches and kicks, but they're learning, you know, to become better athletes. They're getting aggression out, and you know, they're, you know, it's just a very healthy way for a young man to be able to deal with maybe some things that are, you know, built up inside of him.
Well, thank you for being so open and honest about that. I couldn't agree with you more. I'd like to see I mean, like I said, there was judo in my school. I did wrestling and judo, but honestly, you know, I would have never graduated. Who knows what would have happened to me if it hadn't been for judo. And my sensei, even though we weren't technically a sport, it was a club, he knew I would do just enough to get by. So he's like, well, you're going to have a 3.0 or you're not going to compete. Guess what? I had a 3.0 because the only reason I went to school is so I could keep going to judo. And, yeah, that I'd gotten in a lot of trouble in fights, and, you know, it got me out of that. And, yeah, I just see this zero tolerance. And, I mean, I'm not talking about bullying. I'm 100% against bullying, but it's like, you know, when two kids have a little scuffle and now all of a sudden, you know, you're calling the cops and you're going to kick them out. And I think it just gets so far blown out of proportion. And then they, you know, like you said, their emotions get bottled up. They're boys with all this testosterone. And yeah, there's something's got to be done about it.
You keep making them bury that. You keep saying, you're making, you know, boys, you know, I grew up, you know, I was in high school in the 80s. So we could go out into the parking lot and bust each other up. And then I don't know how, I don't remember really any fights that off the top of my head when I was a kid that after we busted each other up, we didn't shake hands and then maybe even became friends. Maybe not in all cases, but a lot of cases, guys became friends after that. That's like male ritual almost. And you know, and you know, and you deal with those things and you get those things out, whereas, you know, now they're telling you that being a man is toxic and that to have those feelings or whatever, you shouldn't, and you should feel guilty about it. And you know, and they're making, you know, boys, they're telling boys they should want to be girls or be okay with, you know, with the feminine, you know, feeling feminine, you know, which just drives me nuts. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I do believe that there are people that are born absolutely that way. But I'm saying for your run-of-the-mill boy, you know, when he's already shut off from the world, if he's introverted and he doesn't feel like part of anything at a school, and he gets angry and gets in an argument with another boy, and you know he gets into a fight with a boy, but he's the one that's singled out because he's the quiet kid looked at as the weirdo or the troublemaker, and now you suspend him from school. What's he going to do with all that anger if he's not able to express it? You know, because he has nobody to talk to, nobody to express it to, no other way to let it out. That's why all this crazy stuff happens. You know, these, you know, you know, you need to have, you know, everybody needs to have some sort of outlet, you know, and if you don't, you know, it creates issues in your head. You know, you start to really dwell on these things, and you don't know how to deal with them. So, you know, sometimes it comes out in these horrible, violent things that we're seeing at schools and you know, in public places or whatever. But you know, I think you gotta be able to let boys be boys, and you know, and as you had mentioned before, I think having you know, those individual sports where a boy can go in and get his aggressions out and stuff, that might open him up a little bit more. You know, you take a kid that has no friends, or, you know, and has some issues maybe even at home, and you put him into a program at school where he's doing an individual sport and he starts to succeed at it. He starts to become the popular kid because he's good at the sport, you know, and people are rooting for him to win because they want their school to win, and this kid is connected to that, you know, and I think that's a great thing.
Absolutely. I'd like to see it more in schools. I'm trying to talk with him. I got kids in high school right now. I'm trying to talk with them. My daughter is actually a wrestler, which is something we didn't see a whole lot when I was growing up. But
Right.
you were talking about weight cutting. I want to go back to that for a minute. And let me know if we're going long. I know you're really busy. But
Sorry, a few more, a little bit.
all right. I did not realize I'd never heard of anything about people having injuries that were related to weight cutting. Obviously, we see a lot, a lot of other problems, people's bodies shutting down. Recently, Michael Johnson passing out in the elevator, cutting weight and stuff. What did you walk around at when you were fighting at 155?
So, okay, at 55, I was walking around at 205. And,
Wow.
At 70, I was walking around at about maybe 215 or 220. So when I would do like signings, like the UFC would say, hey, we want to fly you in and have you do a signing at whether, some kind of, UFC convention or whatever it was, I would show up and people wouldn't even recognize me because, I was basically a heavyweight or or at least a light heavyweight at that point. And people would stare at me and go, you look like Marcus Davis or the guy that ate him. And I would say, I am him. And so, that was my walk around. It's like I am now. That's what I would walk around at because, I ate, the normal amount that I eat now. But I would lift weights and, that would obviously put more muscle on. And then I would go into camps and I'd do 10-week camps and I'd start cutting slowly caloric intake and then upping my burning of calories. And then I would just start to continuously after, every week to 2 weeks start limiting a little bit more of caloric intake. And then when I would get down to the week before, then it would be a manipulation of like carbohydrate intake because that last week I didn't need as many calories or carbohydrates for the fact that I wasn't any longer training as hard. I was tapering at that point. So it's a lot to go into it. And then those last couple of days, right, is a manipulation of your, again, carbohydrate and salt intake, and then, upping your water intake to flush, and then canceling all of that out when you get into that 24 hours before the weigh-in. And then being smart about how you're cutting that water when you actually have to do the cuts the day of. So
knowing what you know now, do you think that the commission or the UFC should step in and say, hey, this is your weight because this is your walk-around weight, or do you think that that's still something that should be left up to the fighters?
You know what? I'm a big freedom guy, and as far as I'm concerned, I think people should be able to do whatever they want to do. And I know that more so goes towards like government stuff, because I'm a libertarian, a massive libertarian. And don't get me wrong, I have some. I hate to use it like say conservative values, because as soon as you use that word, people automatically think Republican or whatever. But I'm not. I'm exactly in the middle here, and I don't believe in social justice and all that stuff at all, and at the same time I have no love for giant business and corporations and stuff like that, like the Koch brothers and stuff, or big pharma or anything like that. But I just think that it comes down to like the individual. You got to be able to find out risk and reward. The risk of cutting that much weight, and when guys do it, sometimes you're gonna come in, you're gonna perform like crap. Other times you come in, you perform fantastic, and there's been times that you don't get to come in because people die from it. So, it's gonna come down to those governing bodies are gonna have to make that decision, because it's their franchise, it's their sport, and they can do whatever they want. They have the freedom to do so. But as far as if there is no rules on it right now, I think people just do whatever you want to do. no business of mine to tell somebody how they need to live their life or what they should do. You know, even in their fighting career, you know, you can give advice, but I don't think you should try to control.
Thank you for that honest insight. Yeah, I consider myself a libertarian, although I hate to label myself. I was after Rand Paul was out, it was kind of like, yeah, I don't really have a dog in this fight because I don't really like the bashing of the right and left. To me, it's kind of like, you know, saying this team over here we're going to play with all offense. This team over here we're going to play with all defense. But you can't use them both. You got to just you know, you got to be just one or the other. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But yeah, I'm with you on that one for sure. Yeah, I talked to actually interviewed Sam Alvey. What was it, about a week ago after his knockout win? He had the same view as you on weight cutting, and I've heard some fighters that want to go more to like a 1FC. You know, like Ben Askren talked about. They walked around. You know, pretty much everybody fought at one weight class above where they would in the UFC. But you know, that's a good point. That, you know, they're contracted fighters. Technically, you're not an employee of the UFC. So, as it is your decision. I got a question from a fan out here. It says, what was the strongest grappler you ever grappled with?
Strongest grappler? Let me think.
Yeah.
Like this, I don't know if this would answer that exact story, but there's a story that or that question. I mean, so I'll try to tell the story as fast as possible. We were doing a camp for Sit Tong, and Rich Franklin, obviously his coach was George Vigel. So George had Rich come to Sit Tong and train with us. So at this day, we were doing a shark bait thing where we were all getting into the ring, and it was me, Rich Franklin, two other real big guys. So I was probably like 205 at the time. Rich was like 225. And these other two guys that came in were both over 200 pounds. And we got in with this guy. His name was Musafar, and he was from Uzbekistan, and he was 155 pounds. And we were all in the ring, and we were saying, okay, we're going to play shark bait. And Musafar said, and I always thought that he sounded a lot like an old school Dracula when he would talk, but he was like, oh, you know, and because I will go last, because when I go, no one else will ever be able to go again, you know. And so we all like laughed and stuff because he was the smallest guy. And we got into the ring, and you know, we were all doing the shark bait thing, and then finally got to him to come in, and then he immediately took down whoever it was, like right off the bat, and then he became bait, and then we all continuously kept going, you know, feeding in, and he was just destroying all of us. And so this was just takedowns at the time, and he was just absolutely destroying us. And we did this, we chased him, everybody trying to take him down for an hour. Okay, and nobody could take him down. It got so bad that in my head, I was so humiliated. I said, I'm just going to try to touch his knee. That was my goal, was just to be able to touch his knee. And I couldn't even do that. And so it almost became something that was supernatural. And then after all of this, I told him that I wanted to pay him to do a private with him because I wanted to figure out what it was that he was doing. And but when we did the private, we wrestled and we grappled and stuff, and he was immovable. Like, I could not move the guy. And he just was, it was the freakiest thing. And then he did this weird feat of strength where, again, I was over 200 pounds. He's 155 pounds. He told me he was going to lay down straight, flat on the ground, legs straight, arms out in front of him, and he wanted me to sprawl onto him and just keep all my weight and pin him on the ground. And he was able to hold on to just one leg and actually stand all the way up in the air with me trying to hold him down, and just basically turn me over and put me on my back. And it was the craziest thing. And I tried to repeat that feat using people that were 50 pounds smaller than me, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't, at that time it was. So by far, he, as far as just a physical being, and I asked him, I said, when did you start wrestling? And he said, he goes, I wrestled when I was born. And I said, no, I mean, when did you start? And he said, when I was born. And I was like, I don't think you understand what I'm asking. How old were you? And he goes, he said, they come into he goes, I was born, they come into my house, they grab me by my hands and hold me up in front of my mother. Then they grabbed me by my feet and hold me up. And then they gave me back to my mother and they said, he will wrestle. And he goes, so I started to wrestle. So, and then he asked me, he said, do you know who? And he said some foreign name I'd never heard. And I said, no, I don't know who that is. And he said, he's the best in the world in wrestling now. And I said, oh, really? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, I beat him twice. He never beat me. So this guy was, again, and it was almost supernatural. It was like everything I tried, any way I tried anything, I could not touch this guy. And as a little short note on that, Rich, when they were doing it, Rich is super competitive. And Rich got so angry that he wasn't able to take this guy down that he actually pulled guard on the guy and then tried to submit him. And the guy ended up taking Rich's back and rear naked choking him.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah, crazy. Just crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. So you know what? Where Khabib gets it from, I guess. That guy's a beast.
Yeah, well, he's like Khabib, right? Like those guys, man. And Khabib, that guy's, they're all like his crew, the guys that he travels with, they're all insane, man. We shared a warm-up room with them, last year, me and Tim Boach. I was training Tim. We were, getting ready for a fight. I can't remember which fight it was, and he walked in and his brother was on the card. So he was there to be with his brother. And they came in there was 5 of them, and they all, those guys all kind of look like each other in that, it's like they have that Genghis Khan gene. They how they say Genghis Khan, like, dominated that area and, bred with all these women. And that's kind of that look that those guys have. Well, they came in, man, and Khabib started wrestling with the other guy, not even on the mats. They were on the rug floor, which was covering cement. And they were smashing into the table that had, like, the blankets on it, throwing each other all over the place, and just slapping each other. I mean, it went nuts. And they were just going at it 100%. And I looked at Tim, and I'm like, these guys are nuts. Here he is, a professional athlete that, what would happen if he just hit just wrong or whatever and dislocated something or, whatever. At that point, in my head, I would have been like, being healthy and stuff is how I live, how I make my money. He didn't care, man. They were going at it like animals. And again, that's their society compared to our society. Like we were talking, boys can't, even, get into a little tiny wrestling match outside of school, or they both get suspended. Where, their society, those guys are friggin' wrestling bears,
Yeah, that's crazy. Literally, I've seen video of Khabib wrestling with a little bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is nuts. And I got to imagine they don't have the same kind of issues that we have. Obviously, they don't have the same gun laws, but I don't think that's the problem. But, like you said, I think it's the aggression and the, male masculinity and things. But yeah, definitely, I think MMA could go a long ways if a lot of people would just listen and kind of back off of their views a little bit. It's like you don't want violence, but you don't want martial arts in your school because of violence. And what do you have right now? You got kids shooting up the school. So what do you want? It's kind of kind of crazy to me.
People say, talk about fighting and violence. I always try to remind them that, to be honest, violence needs a victim. And when two guys do mutual combat, there's no victim. And in martial arts and sport fighting, there is no victim. So it's not violence. Obviously, especially people on the left don't like to hear that. They like to say, no, violence is subjective. It's whatever this and whatever, I'm like, no, it's not. Violence needs a victim.
You need to put that on a shirt. I like that saying.
Yeah, probably would. It'd probably catch on.
Not that you have any time with everything else you're doing, but hey, you don't have to answer this because you're Irish, but of course the fans are blowing me up. If you fought Conor McGregor, how would you fight him?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that they would ask that. So, obviously I'm not a true Irishman. I mean, I'm basically a UK. I always call myself a UK mutt because my family is, my DNA. I actually had my DNA actually done, and to be able to see exactly what I had in me. Which the funniest thing that came back is they identified 4% Neanderthal DNA in me, which, back in the day, they said the Neanderthals never mated with human beings, but apparently one of them got pretty lucky with one of my ancestors. So I got that. That's where I get the short arms and, I guess, freak strength is from the Neanderthal. But, that's like anybody asking, like if you ask me, how would you fight Khabib? I would tell you with a long distance rifle.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I would run away.
Yeah, that guy, just watching him do that, I just said, yeah, no. I actually posted a thing on Twitter. If you look on I don't know if you can look at my past tweets, but it wasn't too long ago. I tweeted about having a nightmare that I was asleep, and in the middle of the dream, I was just getting announced in the cage by Bruce Buffer, and then they announced that Khabib, that I was fighting Khabib, and I said, then, I woke up in my own sweat and urine, and I ran around the house and locked all the windows and doors, and slept with my gun underneath my pillow, and somebody mentioned on there, said, I don't think any of those precautions would help you against Khabib. And I said, yeah, the gun wasn't for him. It was for me to take myself out in case he got inside the house. So, as far as, Conor, I think that Conor's a completely different, it'd be a different thing. I would, especially how I am now, I would be looking to try to use tactical measures to be able to get him on the ground, because that would be my thing, is I would try to get him on the ground. He has such a huge reach advantage. For his weight, and the first time he ever fought anybody that even came close to his reach advantage, which was Diaz, and the first time they fought, he lost that fight. But typically, like, his reach is a lot longer than mine, and I only have, people don't understand this. In UFC, which was weird, the UFC, the first time I fought, they measured my reach, and then what was weird is that they never measured it again. But every time they put my stats up, my reach got longer. So I didn't understand that at all. But I've only got a 68-inch reach. So if you look at that and think about that, for a boxer, that's horrible. And that's that Neanderthal DNA again. I got midgety arms, And if you look at like GSP, who was in my division, his reach was a foot longer than mine.
Oh,
12
wow.
inches longer reach than mine. So, you know, that's why I had to have good footwork. That's why I had to be able to get in and get out as fast as I could, or get in and stay inside. So, which, you know, again, that's what I would have to do if I, you know, and, you know, it's a different time now too. You know, I'm an old man, and he's a young man, and the sport has evolved. It's changed. So therefore, you know, it would have to be on an equal keel, or, you know, if we were equal age, equal time, and during a specific time, who knows what would happen. But like any other thing, you know, just because two guys fight and one guy beats the other guy, doesn't mean that's the way the fight's going to be every single time. You know, we've seen in many fights, you know, two guys, you know, will fight, you know, 3 or 4 times, and there'll be a different winner each time. So.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. So, any guys that you're training with right now that people need to be on their radar, saying that guy, you know, that this person coming up, they're going to be good?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to really say, I don't want to like really put any names out there yet, because I would hate to have pressure or anything like that be on anybody. But I will say that I do have a few guys that I am working with that are really young. And what I mean by young, they're, you know, 18, 19, and they've only got a few amateur fights. They haven't even turned pro yet. And but they look like pros. Like if you watch them in the gym, you know, the first thing you would say is, how many fights does this guy have? And then I'd say, and I'd tell you his amateur record, and tell you it was amateur, you would go, that guy's an amateur. They're that good. So, but I also, you know, I'm working with some. I just recently started working with a couple of new professional guys too that, you know, that are come from a wrestling background, and you know, they have huge potential. There's just, you know, some things that, you know, the little things that got to get ironed out and stuff like that. So, but, you know, my belief is if you come from a successful wrestling background, you kind of get to dictate where that fight's going to take place. A wrestler knows not only how to do the takedown, but how to prevent the takedown. And so you know, a great wrestler with decent, you know, grappling, jiu-jitsu, ground game, and a decent, you know, striking game, can be a very dangerous fighter.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, you know, I watched the entire evolution of the sport just like you did, and you seen a guy like Dan Severn, straight wrestler, and then a guy like Art Jimerson, straight boxer. And Art Jimerson maybe is how you pronounce it, I'm not sure, but obviously he wasn't able to take the leap. Dan Severn was able to use those tools, though, and, you know, make a pretty good career. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting how that, you know, base seems to work out. But then you get good strikers that have great takedown defense, you know, like you developed, and they become animals themselves. So, hey, where can people find you out there on Twitter, Facebook? Are you on social media much?
I'm not on it a whole lot, but definitely in Facebook. I'm on there the most, but it's just my full name, Marcus Paul Davis, and then it says Irish Hand Grenade underneath it. It used to be Irish Hand Grenade. Then somebody actually turned me in, and Facebook then told me that I had to either send them a picture of my driver's license that said Irish Hand Grenade, or I had to change my name. So anyways, and my full name is Marcus Paul Davis. And then, you know, like I said, it says Irish Hand Grenade underneath. If you go to Facebook and you type in Irish Hand Grenade, there's some fan pages. I have nothing to do with those. I don't know. I've never been on them. I don't have anything to do with those. And then I post on Instagram a lot, and it's also Marcus Paul Davis on Instagram. But on Twitter, I'm on there as just Irish Grenade. So that's it. No hand grenade in there. It's just Irish Grenade.
Well, yeah, you know, the speech happy people at YouTube will probably demonetize my video for putting your nickname in, but that's okay with me. I got you before Joe Rogan did. You were a great interview, my friend.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, well, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to let you go. I know you're super busy, but like I said, I grew up watching you, really watching a lot of UFC about that time, and I really appreciate all your time and all the best of luck in the future, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
See you.